All right, and this morning on Let's Talk on WSBS, we actually played that track from the Jayhawks, Nothing Left to Borrow, and my guest this morning is Jim Reynolds, a local musician. A lot of people know Jim, of course. And Jim, there's a significance as to why we played that song this morning, correct?
Yeah, that's actually the name of my new album is Nothing Left to Borrow. And yes, I'm very influenced by the Jayhawks, of course, one of my favorite bands. And I chose the title not only from that song, but also because I've borrowed little bits of throughout my 50 plus years of listening to music. I've borrowed little bits of things from various music, and I borrowed everyone's talent, the local talent that I had to get this thing done. So I felt like it was a perfect name for this. This idea of borrowing, and hopefully I just borrowed and I haven't stolen anything.
Right,
you know.
And then the next CD will be all borrowed out.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. It's funny you say that because originally the title I had was Nothing Left to Borrow, Nothing Left to Lose, and it would be the first side was going to be Nothing Left to Borrow, and you flipped over the record. Or the second, or side B would be Nothing Left to Lose, where I'd do crazy. Like kind of, like a magical or a Sergeant Pepper thing where I could say I could do what I want now.
Yeah,
but then I changed. I just said it's too long.
Yeah,
and so I went with Nothing Left to Borrow.
Gotcha.
So,
tell us. I mean, tell us a little about this new CD. Kind of what went into it.
This has been 16 years, by the way. The last the last one I put out was 2008.
Okay. Right.
That was somewhere near the Big Tree, and I was totally a novice back then. I had no clue what to do. I was telling people I had ideas in my head, and I was trying to get them out, to these people helping me to make it, and it just wasn't happening. And I didn't realize back then what you do is you say, this is my idea, but I want you to give me what you can bring to the table. See what I mean? Like
instead of making it exactly the way
see what I mean?
You have
So
in your head.
So I've learned a lot. That first one I made a lot of mistakes, but it was I'm proud of that. It was what it was. But now 16 years later, I finally get time. After 5 kids and all that other and 5 chihuahuas and all that stuff. I finally get a chance to make another record, and I'm very proud of this one. The songs on this one come from all the way from 1991. The earliest one, I think, is "Meet Me by the River," and then it goes all the way up to the last one. The most recent one I think we did was one called "I Apologize," and that was 2022.
So you've had some of these songs written for years.
I have a book of songs where I anytime I hear somebody say a phrase or something, I write it down quick.
Right.
And then I feel like that's a cool line, and I kind of write down all these lines.
Yeah.
And then I get song ideas on my way to work. I come up with these little tunes, and so I get those, and slowly, sometimes the words comes first, sometimes the tune comes first, but I have big notebooks filled with these songs.
Yeah.
So what I usually do is like this one, I wanted to get the newer ones I had written down because those are fresh in my mind, but I also like to go back and grab a few from the old notebook to go, hey, this was one I think we could flesh out and complete.
Make something, yeah.
But so that's what I did with a lot of these. Some of these, my friend Tom Ingersoll, I got to give a shout out to Tom Ingersoll. He and I have write night, we call it songwriting night, where I go to his place and we haven't done it in a bit, but and we kind of toss ideas around, and he gives me ideas, and I listen to his stuff, and we encourage each other. And we had the first track on the album called "You Gotta Rise." We had actually demoed at his house probably 10 years ago. Where we just. You can find it on YouTube probably, this demo version of it. And then we finally I got the band, guys in the band that I'm in, Harvest and Rust. I got a couple of those guys to come in and play.
And that's the Neil Young tribute band.
Oh, yes. That's NeilYoungTributeBand.com. If you were interested in Neil Young, you'll be able to find our band, Harvest and Rust. There's a good plug for us.
No problem.
But Seth Fleshman plays on this one, and John Kiernan on drums, and I do the bass and the singing, of course. And also Dave Vatone plays keyboard on this one. Both Dave and Seth are in Misty Blues. Misty Blues Band is a local band. Shout out to those guys, too. This is a number 2. This was the very first one we recorded. When I went to Frank Kennedy's studio in Hancock, this was the first one we recorded. and this is the lead-off song on the album called "You Gotta Rise." I like this one because it definitely has a philosophy that I have, the idea that we're always going to be hit with this negativity, and we got to rise above it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's inspired by Maya Angelou because her poem "Still I Rise" is something that I go back to, and I go to her whenever I'm feeling a little down or depressed. I go to Maya Angelou, and I also want to send this one out to Linda Ellerby. She got a hold of me recently and said, "Oh, I heard your song. You got to rise, and these days we got to rise through the darkness." So
sure.
I'm going to send this one out to you, Linda.
All right, again, so we're speaking with Jim Reynolds. The name of the new album is "Nothing Left to Borrow," and the track we're going to play right now, the first track off the album, is "You Gotta Rise." So here it is on WSBS.
A boy, I was filled with rage. It followed me around until I came of age. Felt it rise. When I became a man, I learned to let things slide. 'Cause carrying anger only eats you up inside. I had to rise above the darkness to the light. Now there are people out there who want to take you down, try to break your will and shake your ground. But you rise, cause oh my was right, no matter if they lie, if they complain or shame or blame or criticize. You gotta rise, still you rise. You gotta rise above the darkness to the light. Maybe you'll stumble and you'll fall, and there'll be days that bring you down. That doesn't matter at all, long as you pick yourself up off the ground. Well, the road is rough and the river's so wide, and you gotta get tough to make it to the other side. To rise, 'cause we all gotta choose whether to walk or crawl. Before we bend in the end, I say stand tall and rise. You gotta rise. You gotta rise above the darkness to the light. Gotta rise above the darkness to the light. We gotta rise above the darkness to the light.
Jim Reynolds right there. You Gotta Rise from Nothing Left to Borrow, the new CD that's out by Jim Reynolds. We have Jim in the studio with us. Great tune, like you said, that 70s throwback keyboard thumping along.
Yeah.
And
I kept telling everybody when we made the album, I said, if you can make it more 70s than 80s, because I wasn't a fan of the 80s sound, that kind of processed sound. I said, I like that old 70s sound. That's me when I was a kid listening to 45s back in my basement.
Yeah.
Those were the 70s that I grew up
you didn't want
listening.
like gated drums on it?
None of that, no.
Like that.
I like a lot of raw kind of like,
Sure.
like being in the Neil Young band that I'm in.
Yeah.
You know, Neil played raw. Like he left the mistakes in and was
Yeah.
good with it and all
Yeah.
that. So I'm the same way. I'd rather have a 70s sound than an 80s. So I told them, I said, you know, if you could just keep in mind 70s. Now it's funny that we just listened to that one and I didn't realize the very first line I say is "When I was a boy." That's the very first line of John Hyatt's song "Slow Turning."
Oh, okay.
So if you go to "Slow Turning" and you play it and you listen, it'll say "When I was a boy." I'm like, I borrowed. I borrowed that first line from John Hyatt.
So the second track's going to kick off with Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So that one, I knew that was going to be the start off track. By the way, I liked that John had this roll that he did in the beginning.
Yeah.
Love that roll. I keep telling him that. Boy, I love that roll, and he knows what it's called. It's called it's a typical roll, I guess, for drummers. But I was like, that's a cool roll. And then it sounds to me, it does sound a lot like a John Hyatt, Bonnie Raitt kind of tune,
Sure,
kind of like Thing Called Love. I always say I'd love to be able to get some of these songs to like give this one to Bonnie Raitt and say, hey, cover this tune. This is I got you written all over it. You know? But it's that I did try to get a lot of 70s into this, and even the album cover has like the paneling on it and the old TV, and if you look at the cover of the album, and it's on all streaming services, so this is the actual cover on the streaming services. You'll see a picture in the upper right hand corner, and that was actually the exact picture that my mother had in our kitchen when I was a kid. So there is a lot of significance to the album cover and all the album art. So that little picture of the fruit, I took that from my mother's kitchen when I was a kid in the 70s.
Again, we're speaking with Jim Reynolds. A lot of people obviously know you, Jim, have played with you, and you have this new album out, Nothing Left to Borrow. And so people can find this Amazon anywhere pretty much?
They get it should be on all streaming services that you can find. I also have CDs. If people, I don't know how to do that with CDs, so they could always, if they wanted a CD, they could always like send me a message.
You'll mail it to them or something.
Yeah, PM me on Facebook, and I can get you a CD. Because I did make a bunch of CDs, even though Frank in the studio said to me, "What? Nobody does CDs anymore." I said, "Well, I do. I'm still old school."
Yeah.
But so I do have CDs too available that I can get everybody. But the next track I was going to say is I was going to talk about. I've had some extraordinary experiences recording this CD. One of the things is when I'm writing songs. I get a lot of inspiration, as I said, from the Jayhawks, one of my all-time favorite bands. If you don't know the Jayhawks, please check them out. I mean, they are a criminally underrated band from Minnesota, Minneapolis area. Anyway, I went to a workshop, an online workshop during the pandemic that Gary Loris was running, and he's the lead singer of the Jayhawks, lead songwriter of the Jayhawks, and we could bring a song. So I played him a song that I wrote called Ode to Sadie Jones. It's called Ode to Sadie Jones. And yes, I know I spelled ode, O-W-E-D, because that was on purpose, because it's like you owe someone something. So I was playing, I like word play. So Gary, I played him the song, and he gave me some feedback, and it helped the song to grow to what it was. And I'm really proud of this one. Then I went to my friend and former classmate, Jessie Green. I went to school with her in the Ashley Falls School years ago, Mr. Charbonnet's fourth grade Ashley Falls program. So I got a hold of her online, and I said, hey, Jess, I know you've been playing with Pink, the Foo Fighters, Ben Harper. Yeah. She also played with the Jayhawks for a while. So I said to her, I know you're busy. She's a professional, but I said, can you play violin on this tune? Like, would you be willing to? And I sent her the song, and she said, wow, this is a great song. Absolutely. So she not only, I thought she just throw something on there. You know what I mean? Here for my local, kid from the Berkshires. You know what I mean? But instead, she did like a 3-harmony violin arrangement. She knocked it out of the park. So she sent that. Then she sent that to us, and we put it on the track. And Steve I can't. Sometimes I have songs I can't play. I play bass and I do some chords on the guitar, but I can't play. I can't pick.
Gotcha.
So I said to Steve, I got this song, and I wondered if you can play on it. I'm looking maybe for like a Bob Dylan, Don't Think Twice kind of feel. He goes, I know what you want. He came in and it was like one take, done. I was like, geez.
Yeah,
He knew exactly, and it played exactly what I want. What I was hearing. He knocked. So this then he said, do you want me to do a solo? And I said, sure. So he just threw a solo on there, one take, and then that's what I sent Jessie, and that's what she put her on it. And it's funny. Frank he was like, this song totally features Steve. This is some amazing guitar work from Steve. And then when Jessie put her part on, he goes, I can't believe we have this amazing work by Steve, and now we have amazing work. He said this song is great, but this was the last song we recorded, and he said, you got 12 tracks, you don't need another. And I said, no, this one is important to me. We have one more, I told him, and then afterwards he goes, I'm glad you talked me into this one.
Right.
And that's this one called it's track 6 called Ode to Sadie Jones. It's a nice little dirge.
And this is off of Jim Reynolds' new album, Nothing Left to Borrow. Here we go.
Sadie Jones seemed to come right out of nowhere, as if she had descended from above. At a time when I felt desolate and distant from everything that I used to love. A tangled mystery that twisted up my life. The very thought of her brought me far away from home. I fell for her smile, her words and wondering why, and the pure allure of poor Sadie Jones. I didn't know the trouble I was getting into, thinking maybe she could save me from myself. Sadie had some secrets she'd been holding on to, things she couldn't understand herself. Life and love are certainly uncertain, futures fraught with so many unknowns. I learned the truth too late and found myself alone. And there was no more of poor Sadie Jones. Sometimes while sitting by my window sad and lonely, feeling like a stranger to myself, I see the imaginary girl who taught me how to disappear and be somebody else. Forsaken promises and wanderlust still haunt me deep down within the marrow of my bone. How I long to be a spirit roaming free, like poor forlorn Sadie Jones. Poor ignored Sadie Jones. Forevermore.
All right, Ode to Sadie Jones.
Yep, Ode to Sadie Jones. So that was some beautiful guitar work by Steve Ide, local Steve Ide. Everybody knows Steve. He's a local legend.
Yeah.
And Jesse Green. Jesse Green, my old former classmate back in the day, but also nationally plays with all these national acts. Very renowned violinist.
We're speaking with Jim Reynolds this morning, the new album that he has out, Nothing Left to Borrow. And Jim, we have time for one more tune. You want to tell us a little bit about what this next one is that we're going to be previewing here?
Yeah. Well, let's go with something a little funky, maybe. This is track 10 on the album, and it's a song called Coming Back to You. This is another one that I wrote quite a few years ago. It was started way back in the early 90s. I had a little bit of it. And then about 20 years later, I think it was 2011 or so,
sure.
I bring it to, was one of the songwriting sessions to finish. And I finished the song then, but that's a great case that some of these songs are in my songbook, and I say, I thought that idea was pretty good. Let me see if I can finish it, and you finish them.
Yeah.
So this one I actually workshopped to Tor Crowder. I brought it to Tor Crowder. He's from the Rev Tor band. Everyone probably might know local
Steal Your Peach
Rev Tor.
band.
Yeah, Steal Your Peach band.
Yeah.
He's got a bunch of great bands up in that he's been playing with over the years. A ton of albums with the Rev Tor band. Good jam band. So I had actually brought him a tape demo version years ago, saying I think you would be good with this song, and he, of course, passed. And I was like, oh, I don't blame him. He's probably like, what's this crummy demo that this guy gave me, right? But I've been friends with Tor for years. But I did try to work it, see if he wanted this one, and then, but he didn't. So then I said, you know what? If I'm going to do this on this album, I'm going to have him play on it.
Yeah.
So he came and played on this album, on this tune, and of course, if you have a jam, kind of funky jam song, you want Tor.
He's the guy.
Yeah. And then
yeah.
Dave Vitone again came to do a keyboard part here, and it's great because Dave Vitone played keyboard on this, and in the end he does this kind of almost like a little funky little run that sounds like Frankenstein by Edgar Winter.
Oh, yeah.
That's another. And I was like, I told them 70s, but any
Right,
70s.
right, yeah.
So he did this funky thing in the end, and we followed him, and it came out, and we just ended perfectly. It was like, oh, this is like magic. And Dave Lincoln played drums on this one. Dave Lincoln played drums on a couple tracks. I traded him for some Buddy Holly albums, so he could, come and play on the tracks.
Oh, okay.
He and I are huge Buddy Holly fans. I said to Dave, "Can you give me some kind of like the band up on Cripple Creek?"
Yeah. So
he gives me this. He says, "This is then something like." I said something like that, kind of Cripple Creek, up on Cripple Creek, and then. So he had that on to give the basis of this funky kind of sound, and that's when I said to Tor, I know you've played with all these Grateful Dead bands and all these other things. I said, I'd rather have more like a Little Feat sound than a Grateful Dead sound. I said, do you know what that means? Like, are you good with that? See, that's the only direction I give. I say, I'm looking for like a Little Feat vibe, not a Grateful Dead vibe.
Right.
Boom. I had somebody listen to this recently and say, boy, I love that song. That kind of, it sounds like a Little Feat song. I was like, oh, that's perfect.
Right.
That's exactly what I was trying to go for. So anyway, this is track 10 off the album, and it's called Coming Back to You.
All right.
Trying to figure out just what I hope to find. Something in my head made me think of you instead. So I turned around before I changed my mind. Somehow in some way I made it over to your place and promised you I'd only stay a while. When I gazed upon your face, felt the warmth of your embrace, stayed the night and woke up to your smile. lying in my chair, and I woke to find you there. But it was just a dream that echoed through my mind. So I went back to bed with all those thoughts inside my head, and found that you'd been with me all the time. I ain't running around no more, wandering days through. After all is said and done, I keep coming back, coming back. I keep coming back to you. Coming back to you.
All right, speaking with Jim Reynolds this morning on WSBS's Let's Talk program. Jim, remind us of the name of that tune. I know.
Oh, that was Coming Back to You. That's one that I started way back in the 90s, and then I finished it in 2011. And that's Torque Crowder playing on that one, and Dave Vitone and Dave Lincoln was on the drums on that one, and that's definitely got some good funk to it, a good vibe.
Awesome. So the new album is Nothing Left to Borrow. You can find it on all the streaming services under Jim Reynolds. And Jim, we probably have a minute or two left. Anything else you want to pass along about the album? Or
Well, to me, this has been definitely a labor of love. I loved this. I'm very proud of it, and I've learned a lot. I think there's definitely some growth here. Hopefully, if people that have known my first album, they would probably see something very different from this one. But a lot of great musicians on this one, and I want to make sure everybody gets their due. Joe Rose is playing some great keyboard on here. Dave Lincoln and John Kiernan are on drums. Andy Gordon plays some beautiful pedal steel. He's in the Harvest and Rust band with me. Seth Fleshman is on guitar. Steve Ide, of course, legendary Steve Ide here in the Berkshire County. Jason Webster plays guitar. Dave Vitone plays keys. Jesse Green on violin, and of course we just heard Torque Crowder doing some great stuff on that. If you're looking for Harvest and Rust, if you're a Neil Young fan, we are playing this Wednesday, a couple days from now. We're playing up in Scotia, a free show up in Scotia, New York. So that'll, if anybody else out there is looking to hear some Neil Young. That's
any Harvest, any Neil Young tribute, or your own stuff for websites you want to pass along?
Oh yeah, and it's for me. It's, as I said, the album is Nothing Left to Borrow. You can find it on all the streaming services. If you need a CD, you can just look me up on Facebook, and I can PM me on Facebook, and I'll send you something. Harvest and Rust. You can find our website. I think it's harvestandrust.com, but also neilyoungtributeband.com.
Okay.
It'll go right to us.
Okay.
Real easy one to remember.
Yeah.
And that'll give us all your dates. I know we are also in September, the end of September, we'll be playing up at the Stationery Factory.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
that is, I'm looking forward to that. I've never played that place, and
right in Dalton,
right in Dalton. I said that's wonderful. I can't wait. That's going to be a great show, and I hope to see definitely some local fans there.
Well, Jim, we want to thank you for coming in. We hope more people discover the album.
No, I appreciate this, and of course, as I said, WSBS does get a shout out.
We appreciate that.
In the liner notes inside when I talk about hearing the Beatles on my mother's
awesome.
kitchen radio. I grew up with that in the 70s.
Yeah.
WSBS, right? It was like always on.
Yeah.
So,
well, thanks. Anytime you want to come back, let us know, and we'll get you back on the air.
No, I thank you very much.
Thank you. Time is 9:43. That's going to wrap up Let's Talk this morning on your hometown station in the Berkshires, 860 AM and 94.1 FM WSBS.